coming to Devil's Gate History Club. It's not really a club. It's a group of people who get together and have all these other people volunteer to be part of the great programs we have here in the community center. So thank you all for coming. And just to help the community center, since we don't charge, we do have a can back there that said, please, would you contribute a little bit so we can pay the community center for allowing us to be here. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Anne-Marie Cannon tonight, who is our speaker. And it's mudlarking the River Thames. So welcome to you for being here to do this for us. And then our next one is in February, and that's Kevin Kaharik, and it's Farm to Table. Don't ask me what. I'm gonna let him be that person who's saying Farm to Table.
It's food, it'll be fun.
So, thank you all for coming, and like I say, there is a little can in the back that would appreciate a few drops of dollars or something so we can pay the community center for letting us be here. So thank you all for being here, and with no ado, it's your evening.
Thank you. Thank you guys all for showing up. I do want to say that I am not alone up here, as you can see, and my nephew is going to be helping me. Introduce yourself.
My name is Finley Grigg, and I am 10 years old.
Yeah. So we're just going to talk a little bit about our adventures on the River Thames and about mudlarking and about the history of the Thames. So I am giving myself free advertising. I also have a podcast called Armchair Historians, and I do have some cards up here with the QR code if you want to ever listen to one of our episodes. Occasionally Finley joins me on the podcast. And the podcast is really about kind of what I'm going to be talking about tonight. I feel that there's history can be the touchstone to a lot of really meaningful conversations. And that's really the spirit of Armchair Historians. I have academics, I have regular people, and it's really just about coming on the show and talking about a particular history that is really, the person who I'm interviewing is interested in. And, it's about the rabbit holes that we go down with history. So, with that, we're gonna move on. Armchair Historians, I got the cards up here. If you ever want to listen to us, give us a listen. So we're going to be talking about mudlarking the River Thames. This is a contemporary picture of the Thames looking upstream towards the Tower Bridge and kind of, did the wrong thing, sorry guys. There'll probably be a lot of that tonight. Over here in this area is the Tower of London. And I'm going to show you, the next image is going to be a painting from the 1700s of pretty much the same view, and that's what it looked like back then. So there was a lot of activity. You can see a lot of things going on. There's the Tower of London, and that's kind of how it's evolved. So mudlarking, what is it? It really came about back in the 17 and 1800s, and the definition in the dictionary is someone who scavenges in the river mud for objects of value. And so the term was first used to describe people who were, really trying to survive life, and they would go down there. A lot of times it was children. Some adults, they would go down to the river in the muddy water and the aerobic mud, and they would search for things of value. And generally it would be things like coal. So they would walk around, root around in the mud. They'd feel the coal beneath their feet because there were coal barges that went up and down the Thames. And they would gather it up, and then they would sell it. And these were people who were really below poverty, who were just really trying to make a living. So towards the end of the 1800s, there were a lot of articles that were written about the mudlarks because people were really interested in that topic. Let's make sure I'm in the right place here. And so, this is a quote from the Yorkshire Post and Leeds Intelligencer from May 31st, 1870, and I'm going to read an excerpt from that particular article. And so that's what it looked like in 1901 if you were a child and you were really just, a lot of times they were orphans. And it was very dirty. The Thames was a very dirty river. So it says, you cannot help but admire the sheer determination demonstrated by the children whom the author managed to waylay as they set out for a day's scavenging by the Thames. The first real insight I got into the miseries of a young mudlark's life I obtained from a quaint trio of them, 2 brothers and their little sister. They were all very ragged and dirty. They were all very lean, but there was just a hint of childhood's pretty chubbiness in the curly-headed little girl's face. A queer little daughter of the regiment, she looked trudging along with the old fig drums slung from her shoulder to put her findings in. Her elder brother and an old nose bag for his receptacle, the younger an old saucepan. The little girl seemed to be about 5 years old, her brothers about 8 and 7. They have a language of their own, as impossible to comprehend as to imitate. It is a special mudlark patois, and appears to be a mixture of the swear words of sailors and the slang of landsmen. So, in a lot of the articles I was reading, they basically refer to them as criminals, whereas today we would, hopefully that doesn't happen, but there was no safety net for these kids, pretty much. And the next picture is some drawings that were done by various artists. And so this was another well-known figure along the Thames. Her name was Peggy Jones, and I have another excerpt from her book, Real Life in London, 1820 to 21 by Pierce Egan. So this is about this particular character that was well known along the Thames. Poverty often teaches the people the most extraordinary means of getting a livelihood. Among these, the class of mudlarks is not the least extraordinary. A mudlark is a person who, on the ebb of the tide, repairs to the riverside in quest of an article that the water may have left behind in the mud. To this description of people belongs Peggy Jones. She was a woman apparently about 40 years of age with red hair, the particular object of whose researches was the coals which accidentally fell from the sides of the lighters. Wading into the water nearly up to the middle and scraping together from the bottom the coals which she felt with her feet. She appeared dressed in a very short ragged petticoats, without shoes or stockings, and with a kind of apron made of some strong substance that folded like a bag all around her, in which she collected whatever she was so fortunate as to find. Her legs encrusted with mud, she traversed the streets of London. Sometimes she was industrious enough to pick up 3, and at others even 4 loads a day, and as they consisted entirely of what are termed round coals, she never was at a loss for customers, whom she charged at the rate of 8 pence a load. She was frequently assisted by the coal heavers, who, when she happened to approach the lighters, would, as if undecidedly, kick overboard a large coal, at the same time bidding her with apparent surliness to go about her business. It was a very difficult life. The water, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, at that point in time was basically an open sewer. So you can imagine it was a very unpleasant lifestyle. So today we're going to look at some pictures of people that we know that are mudlarks. I don't know what happened to that one over on the right, but it's weird. So this is, we're going to be talking about these people. Anna is somebody who I had the good fortune of meeting up on the Thames with. This gentleman, Jason Sandy, I'm doing a giveaway of one of his books. I also interviewed him on my podcast. This is a guy named Simon Bourne. He has a YouTube station called Sci-Finds. And then the woman on the right, her name is Nicola White, and we had the good fortune of being able to meet up with her on the foreshore because my niece made the connection. So we're going to talk a little bit more about them. And then, of course, there's Finley and his mother, Megan, and it's as the tide's going out, and I think it's the first time that we were down at the foreshore looking for treasure. And I think one of the big differences that mudlarkers today versus of the past, they're looking for treasure, they're looking for things of value, but I think Finley said it best. This is an interview that he did when we were in England. We were metal detecting, and I think the same holds true for mudlarking with what he says in this.
Oh, really? I'm super excited.
Seeking to unearth treasures in a field in Nidderdale, history enthusiast, 9-year-old Finley Gregg from Colorado.
I just like the history. I like finding the history. It's a dream come true.
So the treasure that we find along the Thames today is history. It's not so much that we find things of value, but we find things that recollect the history of the Thames. And I will say that when you go mudlarking along the Thames, you must have a foreshore license, which I was fortunate enough to get before they started giving them out. But there's two types of permit. The first one is a standard permit, which I have, and then the second one is advanced. And so for people who find things on their standard permit, they bring them to the London Museum. They have what's called the Portable Antiquity Scheme, and they develop a history of being known for bringing things of historical value in. They get the advanced foreshore license. And basically, when you do find something along the foreshore of historical significance, which generally they say anything over 300 years old, you bring it, they have a liaison at the museum, you bring it to them, they look at the things that you have, they'll tell you about the history of your items, and if it's something really important, they will keep it, which is probably the best compliment.
Yeah.
So when you think of the River Thames, think about all the history, which technically goes back millions of years. But for the purpose of our talk, I'm going to talk about the Stone Age in a general idea. There are sub-ages in the Stone Age, but continuous human occupation along the Thames started about 10,000 years ago. There is evidence of people earlier, but as far as like building up that area around the Thames, it really starts about 10,000 years ago. And then we have the Bronze Age, we have the Iron Age, the Classical era, the Medieval era, the Early Modern era, and the Modern era. So all of that, those time periods are represented along the Thames. So before we go on, I should talk a little bit about the death of the Thames. So by the mid-1800s, the Thames was virtually dead because it was an open sewer for industrial and domestic waste. It was disgusting, it smelled, it wasn't safe, people got sick from going into the water. And so this is a piece of art that was done in 1858, The Silent Highwayman, Death Rose on the Thames. I know I have something else here. And so it wasn't really until about the 1850s that they started connecting the idea of disease and dirty water. And there was a microbiologist named Arthur Hassel in the 1850s, and he described the situation as a potion of the inhabitants of the metropolis, a portion of the inhabitants of the metropolis are made to consume in some form or another a portion of their own excrement, and moreover to pay for the privilege. So that's what that was like. So towards the end of the 1800s, there's some movements to try and make things better. There is a Metropolitan Water Board that is established in 1902, and over the years, starting in the 1950s, life started to come back to the Thames. And so today the Thames is considered one of the cleanest riverways that goes through a major metropolitan area. So let's talk about the different time periods and finds along the Thames. So this is a find from the Stone Age, specifically the Mesolithic. It's a flint hand axe, and it's dated to be between 8,300 and 4,500 BC. And it was actually found by a mudlark. So then we move on to the Bronze Age. These were also found along the Thames. We have a Bronze Age axe heads on the left, and then we have a dagger in a sheath on the right there. And those are both, if you go to the Museum of London, you'll see them there. And this is one of probably the biggest finds ever in the Thames. It's the Battersea Shield. It's from the Iron Age, and it was dredged from the bed of the River Thames at Battersea in London in 1858, and it was during excavations for the predecessor of Chelsea Bridge. And I read that when they found it, it was actually warped into the shape of an S. And then now we're going to get into more common finds. You'll find shards of Roman pottery, which I have a couple pieces up here. This is what they would have looked like before they broke up into little pieces. Roman coins, people find them pretty frequently along the Thames. Roman intaglio, so those would have been, the stamps would have been used to basically seal letters with wax. And then I do have a piece of Roman glass up here, and this middle one is a piece of Roman glass that was found by a mudlark. And then that's a Roman stylus, which I actually did find one when I was metal detecting, and I have an example of one up here too. But I found it metal detecting. And then we move into the medieval, and we have some chainmail over on the right. And we have these pots, and I have an example of one of those over here, where the decorations are actually made with the person's thumb. And some of them, you can actually see the person's fingerprint in it, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, there was the pilgrimage. Thomas Becket was a martyr. The people making the pilgrimage, they were written about these characters in the Canterbury Tales, which I'm sure a lot of you had to read in school. And so these are basically pilgrim badges, which are frequently found along the Thames. And then we move on to the Tudor era. I have some good examples of Tudor greenware up here. Those are fragments on the left, and that's what they would have looked like on the right if they were all in one piece. So the thing I like about mudlarking is that the community of mudlarks are so excited about what they do, and they're really excited to have people follow them. Jason Sandy is he's an expat. He's actually from the South here in the United States. He's an architect, and he lives in London, and he is obsessed with mudlarking. He's involved in trying to get actually a mudlark museum, a place, an interactive place where people can go to, and he's really involved in getting that put together. But he's also an author, and he's written both of the books that I have up here. Like I said, one of the books is going to be raffled off at the end. If you're interested in having a go at getting it, then put your name on piece of paper and put it in the hat over there. And I did interview Jason for my podcast Past. These are the 2 books that he wrote. And this is him talking about this find, these Georgian cufflinks.
It's more the everyday items, the utilitarian items, and that just really resonates with us now because we can relate to that and see how styles have changed over the years and see how people adorn themselves with jewelry, with cufflinks, with shoe buckles. So all of these small things just open a window to the past and really kind of reveal the history through these found objects.
One of the things in your book, and this is a stupid question, but I was going through it today, and there's some green cufflinks that you found, paste cufflinks. Were they together?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it looked, you took a picture. Is that exactly how you found them?
Yes. Yeah, so back then, cufflinks were double-sided. So you had a link on both sides, whereas today, normally you just have one side that's decorated, and the other is just like that pivot rod that kind of secures it to the back of the link. So they were actually connected together with a small loop fastener. So a lot of times the reason why they fell off and were lost in the Thames is because one side pops off and the other side falls into the river. So you normally don't find them together, but this is one of the rare ones that I found that was actually still linked together.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. How old were they?
So those are about the Georgian period, so 18th century.
Wow. Pretty color of
And,
green too.
Yeah, it is. So a lot of times they were actually using colored glass to imitate more precious gemstones. So it would have been worn by everyday people, so not kings or queens, but people like you and I. And what they would do is they would actually put a silver foil behind the glass, and they would kind of chamfer the glass, cut the glass to really make it look like a precious gemstone. And then that was then enclosed or encased, set within either a brass setting, or a pewter setting. And the brass was highly polished, so it did look like gold. And when you'd have a very striking green stone in there, it looked like an emerald. So you could do a pretty good fake job by cutting glass and then setting it in a very bright colored brass setting.
So these are cod bottles. I have examples of broken pieces of them up here. And they were invented in the 1800s, I believe. They're called cod bottles after the man who invented them. And so also with the cod bottles, you have these glass marbles which were put into the bottle, and then they'd fill it up with the soda, and the marble would rise to the top, and there would be a vulcanized rubber seal in there, and that's how they would stay closed. But they're really cool looking, interesting bottles. And another thing, if you look at any of some of the glass we have, what happens over time is that it's like some kind of chemical reaction in the mud and in the water. The glass turns this really lovely opalescent kind of rainbowy color, which I have a couple examples of that. So that's fine from the Victorian era. And here's our friend Nicola White. That's me with Nicola on the foreshore. She has, if you're interested in going down this rabbit hole, she has a great YouTube channel. In fact, several years ago, Bob and I had gone to England, and when we came back, he watches a lot of YouTube videos, and he started watching these YouTube videos of Nicola White along the foreshore. At this point, I had no idea what mudlarking was. And so I started watching these videos, became completely obsessed. We were planning another trip to go to England, and that's when I got my foreshore license before they stopped giving them out. And my niece in Finley connected with her. Actually, Finley's been on one of her shows, and here's a picture of them with her on the foreshore. And Finley actually has I don't have an audio clip of her because I've never interviewed her, but Finley has a story to tell about a piece of chain that Nicola gave you, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, she gave me this, it's this piece of, it's like, it looks like chainmail, and it has these two clasps at the end, and it's for, if you can't fit your buttons together when you're on your coat, you put those things on them.
And when was that from?
It's from like the 1800s.
Did you say you have them in your box?
Yeah, and I have it in my box.
So if you're interested afterward, come on up and look. So Nicola in the mudlarking community is known as the Queen of Clay Pipes, which I have some examples here. And every time you watch her video, inevitably she finds clay pipe. And so the clay pipes were the cigarettes from the 1400 or the 1500s, the end of the 1500s, until the early 20th century. They were made of clay and they were one-time use. They would have tobacco inside of them. You'd use them one time and then they'd discard them. So you find them all over the Thames. And actually, you know, the 1800s, they were using them here in Georgetown. And I know this because I was walking the dog the other day and I found a little tiny piece of a clay stem. And the thing about the Thames is that the mud in the Thames is anaerobic. And so when something gets encapsulated in that, it is preserved to the same degree it was when it fell into the mud. And so, you know, you find these clay pipes all over the place. And this is a chart that shows you. So Sir Walter Raleigh, I think he was the one who was, you know, identified as bringing tobacco to England, but actually it probably happened sooner than that. So if you look at this number 1 bowl up at the top left, it's a little tiny bowl that you would have found maybe 1580 to 1620. And the reason it was so small is because tobacco had just been introduced to England. It was very expensive, so you would just get a little tiny hit of tobacco. But as time goes on, as you can see the evolution of the bowls get bigger and they become more ornate. There's a lot of really ornate bowls that you'll find, and it's so exciting when you're down there and you see a bowl sticking out of the mud. So here are some painters' renditions of people smoking pipes. This was a commemorative painting called The Pipe of Freedom when England abolished slavery. Some of them had these huge stems. And then at the end, you can see on that one, there's like a red part. And what they would do is they dip them in wax so that they wouldn't stick to your lips when you were smoking. And this is my friend Anna. She has a great Instagram. If you guys are on Instagram, she's always posting her finds. She's very well known in different circles, but especially in mudlark circles. And she's at Foreshore Seashore. And she was very kind. She met me down at the foreshore the first time I went mudlarking. This last time I was in England, in Greenwich. And she talks about pins in the interview, because I also interviewed her for the podcast. And she talks about pins, which I do have examples of. And the first time I went mudlarking was probably 2-3 years ago. And I knew that there were pins there, but I just could not see them. I couldn't find them. And then the last time that we went, I met a guy on the foreshore, and like I said, the mudlark community, they're just so passionate about what they're doing. And there was a gentleman there who is actually kind of well known too. I didn't know him, but he spent time with me and he showed me where to look for them and how to find them, enough so that I have a little salt cellar filled with pins. But Anna says it best, and I'm gonna.
And then there's another category of objects which I like, because for me they bring the past alive in a way that my history lessons never could. For some reason, history never came alive for me. It was like looking at shadows on the wall. The people weren't real. I couldn't connect with their emotions. I couldn't imagine what their lives were like. And yet, when you find, for example, dress pins, of which I have 15,000. In fact, I have them near me somewhere. Oh, here they are. I'm going to shake them. You can hear them in the little jug here. 15,000 dress pins. When you find those and you begin to wonder why they're there, and then you realise, as you find them, that these were objects that were the furniture of the past. For hundreds of years, London has lived with these pins. And these pins weren't the kind of throwaway, who cares about them items that we have now. In the 15th century, these pins were so valuable because the metal that they were made out of was quite hard to come by, that they were actually bequeathed in wills. And I worked out that you could, 100 pins would buy you 33 sheep, the same amount of money. That's how valuable they were. And then metal became more available, and the price went down. But they were still really important items. There were trade wars over them, big arguments.
Oh, anyways, that was about the end of it. So this idea of pin money comes about. We do see will in the 1500s where they talk about basically pin money, a gentleman who passes away and the pin money for his wife. And so pin money, I'm sure you've heard of that, literally comes from back in the medieval time when women were actually given money to go buy pins, and in the 1400s in England you could only buy pins on the 1st and 2nd of January because they were trying to cut down on imports from other countries. But it's a whole story. So, but it's evolved over time. It's got some political ties as well. But so pin money today, we think of it as, money that we put away for non-essentials. But in the time of the beginning of pin money, it was basically a father or a husband would give money to their daughters or wives to literally buy pins. So these are pictures of...
That's what you get.
That's what you get. And I mean, I don't know, and there's so many of them down there, and, I just was tickled pink when I found them. So if you want to see some real pins, they're up here. Okay, this is our guy, Simon Bourne. He has a YouTube station. He's known on the internet as Sci-Finds, and I think it was Finley who turned me on to watching his YouTube channel, and we did actually interview him. So a lot of times people like to find things with names on them or companies because, you can continue the rabbit hole when you get home from the foreshore. You can look up the names, that type of thing. Well, Finley asked a question to Simon when we interviewed him, and I'll just let him tell you about it.
What is your favorite pie?
Cool, that is difficult. Well, so what it was, I was with a friend, Jules. He's often in a few of my videos. You may remember Jules and his dog Poppy. And it was before I was doing YouTube, but he said to me, we were searching a certain spot in Limehouse, which is East London. So we're scraping away, and this coin thing flipped up, which was silver, and we could see immediately there was some writing on it. It had a badge, which turned out to be the Royal Flying Corps badge. And that is the predecessor to the RAF, which is the Royal Air Force. And there was a name on it, N. Posner, a number, and then the word Jew underneath that. All this information on the little coin. On the other side, it was the French Marianne. So from the 2 French franc silver coin, that was left as it was. The side of the writing would have been sanded down and engraved. Now, how exciting was that? I thought at first it was a 10p, but then when you realise that there's, obscure writing on it, beautifully engraved as well it was, fantastically engraved. What I did after that is research the guy, Nathan Posner. He was born in about 1901, I think. No, a bit earlier than that, because in 1911 he was 18, because he went off, we know he went off to World War I. And it was his dog tag. I just need to know if there's any descendants living in the area that would want it back, because I've done the research, I've found the find. If there's any family left, then I'd love to return it.
Wow.
So they wrote an article. If you Google my name, Simon Bourne, and you put in dog tag, it comes up with the article. They put it online as well. So after 2 weeks, they come back to me, the editor said, "Oh, good news! We've got the grandson of Nathan Posner. His name's John Silverton, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And yeah, if you'd like to return it, you can do. So I said, absolutely, it belongs to his family. So we met up and I gave it back to him, and he was doing his family research at the time. And he was overwhelmed with what it was. In fact, Nathan's daughter was still alive at the time, and she was in her 90s, and she said, I couldn't meet her because she was in poor health, but she said it made her year knowing that her dad's dog tag had been returned and found.
Wow. I love these stories. So, yeah, how are we doing for time?
We're fine.
Okay, because I'm almost done, so we can take questions. So the next slide I'm going to show you are strange things that can be found or have been found along the Thames. And I think this was Nicola White found this, and it's when I talked about the adornment of clay pipe bowls. This is a woman on her privy. And yeah, they got real creative. So that was an interesting find. And so we have a lot of different things up here. People are always finding dentures. These particular dentures are made out of vulcanized rubber and enamel. This was another find from Nicola White, and it was from, oh, yeah, this kid actually got to go to Nicola's, what was it? Her studio, so he actually saw this. But it's actually worth a good amount of money, and it's from Africa, I think the 18 or 1700s. The other thing you got to think about is the Blitz. In England, there was a lot of artillery, there was a lot of bombs being dropped along the Thames, and it does happen that a mudlark will come across live ammunition, and this is a grenade. You gotta call the police, it's a whole big thing. This is a skull that was found by a mudlark, and I think it's in this book over here. And they called the police came, and then they had archaeologists. It turns out that it was the skull of a young girl who, could have been mudlarking along the Thames in the 1800s. So it was between 17 and 1800s. And then this is an oddity along the Thames that nobody's really sure why, but you'll find garnets, little garnets, and mudlarks love to find these and make jewelry out of them. They think it was some kind of industrial thing. I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, I haven't found a garnet yet. That's one of my bucket list finds. And that's it. Sheila, I think that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Does the mudlark community extend beyond the Thames in London?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, mudlarking, you can do it anywhere. I do it in Georgetown every time I take a walk. Ask Ruth. I'm always finding stuff in the mud. But it kind of started there in the Thames, but you could mudlark anywhere. There's a lake in New York somewhere, Horseshoe Lake or something like that, and there's all kinds of stuff there, and people go there to mudlark. Good question. Sandy.
You mentioned that they don't issue the licenses anymore to do that. Does that mean the license isn't required, or how do you go about it? If you want to do it?
No, you're supposed to have a license, and what happened is they started issuing them in 2016, and I got mine not too long after that, but so many people were getting their license, and they were disrupting the foreshore, so they're trying to slow that down. It's been almost a year. I don't know what they're going to do. They're talking about reissuing them, but I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm grandfathered in. Anyone who has licenses, so as long as I renew my license every 3 years, I get
But if you don't have the license, you can't go out there. And
technically, you're not supposed to, but I will tell you, a lot of people just go down there and, they're walking along the beach and they see stuff. They don't know.
Yeah.
So I've never been asked for my license when I've been down there, but technically you're supposed to have it. And I think children under 12 don't need to have a license as long as they're with an adult who has one.
Thanks.
What
Christine?
is the foreshore and how big is it?
That's a good question, and I didn't talk a lot about that. So the foreshore is the part of the beach that is exposed. So the Thames is a tidal river. I don't know if I said this. Did I say this yet? It's a tidal river, and that's the thing about it is it rises and falls with the North Sea, and when it falls every day, twice a day, it is the largest archaeological site in the world. And so the foreshore is a part of the shore that is exposed as the water goes out and then comes back in.
And you can go out at anything that's dry? I mean,
Yeah, you can go out on anything that's dry. It gets really muddy, and usually that's where you're going to find the good stuff. You got to have, muck boots, or be really prepared for the environment down there. And so, yeah, what happens is, the tides. There's tide charts. There's certain times of year where the tide goes out really low, and that's when a lot of the really good finds are found.
and then do you find things, I'm sure you find things that are scattered, but you were talking about not a hoard, but what's the, we said there was something named after Finley.
Oh, that was metal detecting. So
Okay.
we went metal detecting up in York, and actually Finley was interviewed by the media because he's a little celebrity. And when we were there, somebody found a hoard metal detecting, and a hoard is anything that's 4 or more coins that are in the same general area, and I think there was 14 Elizabethan coins that were found. And as they're interviewing Finley, somebody says, "Oh, somebody found a hoard." And Finley freaks out. He's like, "Oh my God, a hoard! They found a hoard!" And he just goes running away from the interview. and so I didn't know this until tonight. My niece told me they actually named that hoard the Finley hoard. 'Cause he was
I wanted to say that because it's a tidal river and there's the low tide and high tide, and Finley, we would put these rubber boots over his feet, and we didn't want to wear them out because we were going to be metal detecting and whatnot. We took them off, and a wave came by because a boat went by, and we both saw a full pipe, like the ones up front. And Finley just lost his mind and walked straight into the water with no boots on whatsoever. And he does wear braces, and so it was an issue. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And we didn't get the pipe so that's the thing. You can go to the exact same spot every single day and find a new treasure every single day. And that's what mudlarking to me is so amazing. That we're also metal detectorists and mushroom hunters. We like hunting for anything. But with mudlarking, you can go to that exact same spot every day, and you're gonna find something different every day because of the low tide, high tide. And the other thing that we learned from literally random mudlarks, and everybody was so friendly and so willing to give information to us, which I found really refreshing on the foreshore, that we learned that certain shapes and certain kinds of metals tend to stay together, and the pins that you were talking about, if you find things that are similar shape to pins, that's where you're going to go to find the pins, or you're going to find things that are round, and so keep going in that same direction because you might find coins.
Yeah. The water, sorts out like with like.
Yeah.
So are things coming down the river, or is it mostly these are London items that are in place
from
and
everywhere.
They're from everywhere?
Yeah, what happens
Trade
is that
routes.
things that are in the mud for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, because the clippers, the Uber, passenger boats go up and down the Thames, and it churns that up, and so that's things are revealed that have been there in situ for however long. And usually you'll find, you can look at the old footprint, the old maps, and you can see what was there at different periods of time, and you will find those things in those areas. Like if they were manufacturing Chainmail, I have an example of chainmail over here. You'll find it there in a particular area, yeah.
Finley, what was your favorite part of the trip?
Probably, I can't really pick I can't pick a favorite part.
Maybe going into Bla's house.
Yeah. Yeah, probably going to her studio.
Yeah.
Question?
How many times have you gone back and done this?
Me, just 2. Finley went the first time this past year. They're already planning another trip in March. So, and they made all the connections. They're going to meet people on the foreshore and do it all again. I'm a little gel.
Is the water there fresh or salt water? Or
It's
in
brackish.
between? It's brackish.
So yeah, as the tide comes up, and to a certain point, I think it's called the tideway. But as you go further upstream, it's fresh water from the tributaries that are going into it. So it's a mix.
I think it's great fun to have this done. Obviously, in the 19th century, we had a lot of British folk in town
Yeah.
who would be nodding about, oh, mudlarking, but still appreciative of what you find. I think that's great.
All right. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Oh, don't forget about the drawing. If you guys are interested, fill out a piece of paper, put it in our hat, and we're gonna do a drawing.
I wanna see this stuff.